To anyone who finds this recording, hopefully you are someone who can help me. I'm in a lot of trouble. I stuck my nose where it didn't belong, and now I'm on the run. It started in 2007 when my family and I went to visit my uncle Junot Díaz in New Jersey to celebrate the release of his book, The Brief, Wondrous Life of Oscar Wilde. While we were visiting, I asked him about his book and what his inspiration for writing it was. He told me that his inspiration came in 4 parts. The first part came from folk tales that his grandmother used to tell him when he was a child. Uncle Junot was born in Santo Domingo in 1968 as the third of 5 children. But he only lived there until 1975 when his family decided to move to New Jersey during tough times. The second part came from the comics and sci-fi books he used to read, especially Star Trek. The third part came when he was talking with an old friend. His friend tried to mention Oscar Wilde, but due to his Spanish accent, he mispronunciated wild and ended up saying wow. That mispronunciation was what set the idea in motion. These 3 pieces of inspiration are common knowledge, but my uncle whispered a 4th piece to me. That 4th piece was something he had heard about from an old friend named Junior. I could not get the idea out of my head that this story was possibly based on real-life events, so several years later, I decided to do some investigating. I started by visiting different settings in the book to collect information. The first locations I visited were in New Jersey that were mentioned in the book. I looked through school records of Don Bosco Tech and New Brunswick College. I found mentions of a student that I believed to be the same Oscar that was in the story. The other locations I visited were in the Dominican Republic, where I found evidence providing the existence of a renowned doctor named Abelard and information that he died in prison. I also discovered the existence of La Inca, who I mentioned the story to, and she told me a very similar tale to what my uncle wrote. The story started by introducing the reader to the concept of a curse on Oscar's family known as Fuku, and its counter-curse, Zalfa. The story tells us about Oscar's early years. He wanted a girlfriend, but was unable to get one. Although he's grown up, he gains weight and becomes awkward and lonely. He went to high school, where he was ridiculed because of both his weight and his love for sci-fi fantasy. He was still desperate for a girlfriend, but he fell for girls that weren't good choices for him. In high school, he falls for a girl who has a boyfriend. In college, Oscar met the narrator, Junior, who tries to help him with college life. During this time, he falls for the cool girl that everyone wanted. Then she broke his heart, and while drunk, Oscar tried to kill himself by jumping off a bridge. But he lived. After graduation, Oscar worked as a substitute teacher and later traveled to Santo Domingo, where he fell for a prostitute who was the girlfriend of the captain of the secret police. El Capitan eventually found out, so he had 2 of his thugs take Oscar to the cane fields, where they beat him up and left him to die. But he lived. However, Oscar did not heed the warnings of El Capitan. Eventually, El Capitan's thugs took him back to the cane fields, where they executed him. After comparing La Inca's tale to my uncle's, and found them to be almost exactly the same, I thanked La Inca and tracked down Junior. What I learned from him was that the people in the story were all real. He even told me who the most important people were. Sorry, I thought I saw the man with the no face. First, there was Oscar. Second, there was his sister, Lola. She was like a second mom to Oscar, and she did her best to look after him while their real mom was working her various jobs. Speaking of their mother, Belicia, short for Belly, had a terrible life. She lost her parents, was treated like a slave by her foster family, and she fell for a gangster who was married to a sister of the corrupt ruler Trujillo. She got pregnant, and the gangster's wife sent her thugs to drag Belly to the cane fields. The same cane fields not that Oscar was dragged to later in the story, where they beat her up and left her to die. She survived but lost her baby. She fled to New York, got married, had Lola and Oscar, then her husband walked down on her. She then got breast cancer and died from it after Oscar was murdered. According to family history, Belly's father, Abelard, was once an upstanding citizen. Then Trujillo took notice of Abelard's oldest daughter, and when Abelard refused to let Trujillo have her, Trujillo and the secret police had Abelard arrested on false charges. The next important person in the story is Zainka. She was Abelard's cousin, Belly's guardian, and Oscar and Lola's grandmother figure. Junior was also important to the story. He was Oscar's roommate in college and did his best to look after Oscar and even shared some of Oscar's interests. Junior told me that he hopes that Lola's daughter will one day piece together all of Oscar's research and break the curse of Fuku. After interviewing him, I started gathering evidence to find out more about the curse. Among my discoveries, I found symbols of Fuku and Zafa that occurred throughout the book. The symbol of Fuku is the aforementioned man with no face. The man with no face is seen whenever something bad is going to happen to one of the characters. The second symbol of Zafa is the mongoose. When they were in the cane fields, Belly and Oscar felt like they were saved by the mongoose. Despite this symbol of goodness for Zafa, I found instances that allowed Fuku to gain the upper hand. One example of this is the differences in the aftermath of both Belly and Oscar's time in the cane fields. After nearly dying, Belly fled for her own safety. Disappointingly, Oscar couldn't learn from Belly's life lessons, as she never told Oscar about them. Another piece of irony came from Oscar's nickname, Oscar Wilde. It was a comparison to the famous British author Oscar Wilde. What made this ironic is that he wanted to be a writer and was actually a social outcast like Oscar Wilde. The third piece of irony comes at the end of the book when the package that contained what they needed to break the curse of Fuku never arrived. This missing package is ironic because it once again shows Fuku getting the upper hand on Zafa. When I turned my investigation toward the missing package, I found out that under the orders of El Capitan, the secret police force intercepted it. I found the package. Don't ask how. Inside was enough evidence to convict El Capitan of several crimes and end Fuku. The secret police are now searching for me. I'm currently in hiding, and I'm recording this in case I'm able to...
Policía! Abre la puerta!
Oh no. They found me. Listen carefully. I hid the package in the freezer of a restaurant dedicated to Oscar Wilde. Get the package before the secret police find it, break the curse, and bring El Capitan to justice. Best of luck. Zafa!